Well, I'm doing this one a little early in the week because I'm going to be out when I normally do all the editing stuff. So I'm doing this a little early in the week. Still sick. I feel like I don't look great. Um, but this will be very quick because I just had a wonderful interview last night with Nick Rennis of the business. He and his partner run the wonderful distributor and record store, the business out of Anacortes. And I'm lucky to be distributed by them. And we had a great conversation. It was really affirming to a lot of the things we've been talking about here, and some gave planted seeds about even more confidence about we just need to be thinking outside the box. And um, I just came away really impressed. So I think we're just going to go straight into that because it's a kind of wide ranging conversation. Uh, so yeah, let's go listen to my interview with Nick. All right, so I'm here with Nick, Nick Rennis. Is that not?
Yeah,
Um, I was
that's me.
like, wait, hold on a second. Uh,
Present.
uh, uh, who runs the business out of Anacortes, who is my distributor for physical media and is kind of a unique situation where it's also a store. So I'd love what's the normal pitch you have for the business? How do you describe it?
I mean, yeah, the easiest thing is that we're a record store, but then at this point, I now usually just describe and then we also do a lot of label operations because we do
Oh
so much
yeah.
stuff for so many different people. Yeah, we're a wholesale distributor, but we also do a lot of mail order fulfillment, and
Okay.
we do a lot of, we we just have a kind of close knit group of labels that, because it's a relatively small operation, just Evie and I, if there's somebody who wants to work with, or we really want to work with them, we have the ability to just kind of be like, well, what don't you like doing?
Hmm.
And maybe we could do that part for you, you know?
Yeah.
um, so it's really like individualized. So it's really difficult to say like, this is exactly what we do, you know? But
Yeah.
yeah, for the most part, on a daily basis, we open up a record store and then are usually there packing records that are either going to people who have purchased them on Bandcamp, whatever, or
Hmm.
in bulk to stores.
Yeah. I had forgotten that you told me that you were doing that for some stuff, for some labels and doing different label ops stuff. Like, I think that's a smart, addition or pivot to the sort of model that you have where you're like, hey, we ship things and we know how to do small business things. I talk a lot to, I feel like there's certain things I'm good at, and from like making analytical things. Like here, I could hand people my spreadsheets that I use. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
like we don't share that stuff very often. And I think just being like, hey, we're good at this. Why don't you let us do this?
Yeah, totally.
Is a great
Well, and
model.
and the mail order thing too for us has been like, as we've incorporated ourselves with a lot of international labels, especially
Hmm.
right now, it's really appealing for an international label to like send something to us in bulk and have
Yep.
stock in the US, and they don't have to deal with individual international shipments for a release. And then, we're just responsible for all of their US shipments.
Yeah.
And then
And yeah,
a US customer can pay, $6 or whatever for shipping, for a label in Europe that they're ordering from.
and the ins and outs of both importing and exporting, I'm sure more than the
Yeah.
average place, and how to make do it right. I've been thinking a lot about that in that like we're not supposed to, I use Mo Beneko and they're from Taiwan, I believe,
Yeah.
and we're not really supposed to be dinged on the record imports, but you have to go fight it, right? Like they're not going to
Yeah,
care.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
and the reverse of that too, like,
Mm,
exporting from here elsewhere, it used to always kind of be a gamble, roll the dice of like,
mhm.
maybe you're going to get dinged on this, maybe you won't. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh yeah,
We'll mark it
totally.
as a gift and cross our fingers.
Yeah.
But now, more often than not, it's like every package, like you are going to get hit with something, some unknowable amount.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to figure out that systems and things like that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. So having an expertise and then sharing that expertise, I think is an interesting. I think there's more. I think we like look at PR and like a couple other things as like, oh, you can be specialized in that way and add value to the scene or the the music the tiny music industry. But I think there's more specialization than people think there is out there. And it's like, how much do you just want to do it from a mutual aid perspective? Like,
Yeah.
hey, here's an open source thing I put out versus like, how much could you actually operationalize it and turn it into a small fee or taking a percent? And I think all those, this is kind of a topic that we're going to get into is like, I just like the idea of people going, well, what can I do that's different instead of going like, oh, I want to run a record label and a business, like a record store
Yeah.
in the same way we did, 20, 30 years ago. And I think that's just asking for so much pain.
Yeah, yeah. There's no model, and something that we have come to appreciate about what we do, and have to sometimes remind ourselves of is that like we we have to be really flexible in our thinking, and like if somebody, if you or anybody else were to ask me, like, well, in a year, what's your project going to look like? I couldn't tell you because I don't know. Like half of our labels might cease operating next
Yeah.
year. I don't know.
Yeah.
We might have two times more, on
Yeah.
our roster than we do now. It might be a really slow year. It might not. And in the meantime, there might be a handful of people that come to us looking for help with something that we've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
That's just been the whole project for us. Like adding all of these little things like, oh, I guess we could try doing that. I guess we could try doing that. I guess we could
Yeah.
try doing that. And that's where it gets to this like super individuated,
Yeah.
service that we
Yeah.
offer.
You're really in the services industry now,
Yeah.
instead of like, I mean, you always were, but you're in like the full custom services industry,
Yeah.
basically.
Yep.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, not even though we've even had some of those conversations, I've been like, I'm so small right now. I shrank back pretty small there for a good while, and I was always like, I kind of have my office. I know how to do everything, but
Yeah.
been doing it for a long time. But in the back of my mind, it's like, yeah, I could totally see a world where you tick up just a little bit past the point of staying on top of things, which I can barely, like half the time I can barely stay on top of, half the
Yeah.
tiny bit I'm doing, uh and yeah, you suddenly are like, well, I really would like some help, but like, how do you get help with these days? You know what I mean? Like, what does that look like, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
and there's a romance to doing what you and I do.
yeah.
And I think that especially with a lot of new labels, that
Mhm.
that energy is palpable, and like we want to foster that.
Mhm.
Like somebody has this cool new label and we're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, this is great." You're cataloging a scene or something that
Mhm.
needs cataloging or whatever, or just you're doing this project that you're really excited about, and the like knowing that there are things that are going to sap that joy from you, and like
That's
I,
such a good point.
being like one level of remove, I can usually do some of those things for you that will sap that joy, and that's just like my day to day. But then I also have my record store, so like that's where I get a
Yeah,
lot of my joy. Like
yeah, yeah,
I can
exactly.
be I can be responding to the customer complaint email, but also having like a really nice conversation with somebody in my store.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And I just like that point of, I think that's something we, as kind of an introverted guy who's trying to get back out in the world, but obviously I can't just go back out in the world the way I could when I was younger. So that's kind of like why I'm doing things like this.
Yeah.
There's just this honest thing of like, I have a lot of knowledge I could just give to people, and you're like that, I'm sure times, especially in the specialities that you've been in, and you've seen problems like
Yeah.
with the range of people you've worked with and stuff, like you've just come up against problems, and you're like, oh, I know what to do with that. Versus there's tons of things I'm sure if even if I 20 years in, if I hit certain things, I'd be like, I don't know. Either I'm gonna get
Yeah.
real quiet about it and like muscle through, or I'm gonna maybe remember I could go ask some people,
And it's different with everybody, like especially with a lot of the like self-releasing artists that we deal with,
Yeah.
like who are not doing this project from a label perspective, per se, but more directly as a creative project only,
Hmm.
but they do want like full control. There are things that like we call it artist brain,
Yep,
like
yep, that's good.
that
Yeah,
just
yeah,
have to be like, I need you to handle this because this is like a catastrophe crisis thing for me. Whereas for me, it's like something I can just like deal with in two
yeah.
seconds. Like, no problem. Go back to doing, with the thing
Go
that you
back to
do.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's such a good point. And yeah, I talk my take on that is especially anybody who has that level of like, I just want to do it myself. And I always make the case that most people should be doing that, to be honest, until they're at a certain level. Being a
Great.
label, I'm kind of, shooting myself in the foot, but like uh I always say if I was starting today, I would be a manager, not a label, right? I'd have
Mhm.
a two or three people I'd try to manage and be
Sure.
way more of a partner too, and do that sort of stuff where you're like, I'm just gonna take the problems away for you, go be a fixer, you know what I mean? And
Yep.
it sounds like you're doing very similar stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so a lot of things we've been talking about is just kind of flipping the sort of normal press cycles and the way we do things in general on its head, and re-examining it and just being like what's working and what's in is not. And one of the things I'm curious, you it was funny when I said that, I said I started talking about that in a previous newsletter, and Jay Moss from the Modern Folk was like, he was typing me the email, and then I said it later in the same episode, which was like, I was completely the only thing I repeat to everybody about press is the story about the Mount Eerie record in New York Times. You know what I mean? Like the tweet
Sure.
like stuck in his brain and stuck in my brain like
Yeah.
so deeply, and we're like, yes, like exactly, like and it's do you want to explain what I'm talking about? I'm sure I'm talking
Sure.
about
Well, I mean, yeah, from our standpoint, so yeah, Mount Eerie microphones, the PW Elverman Son operation, is the all of the mail order and all of the wholesale. That's all us. um, and a lot of the like day-to-day operational stuff. And the thing that you're referring to is, we see the influxes of like, oh, this new thing came out, an update came out, so now there's a slew of pre-orders or whatever. Um, and the one of the like brain-breaking things that happened was at some point he got written up in the New York Times. Huge, beautiful spread,
yeah,
color photos. Like where else is there to go?
yeah, this is
Aside
the
from the
pinnacle.
paper of record.
Yeah,
This is not just a thing that music nerds read. This is the most like maybe not normies, but like intellectuals are all looking at this.
yeah,
um and you know we saw that that was happening, like prepped ourselves like, oh shit, here it comes, here comes the slew of orders. Nothing, like no measurable effect
yeah.
now.
I always quote that there was two orders that day, and whether or
Yeah.
not that's apocryphal, I don't remember, but like
Yeah, I mean, it's like, now I what I don't see is like digital stuff. I
stream,
don't
yeah, of
see
course,
streaming,
yeah,
whatever. And I presume that a lot of people who didn't know what that was, the first
it
thing
would
that you
go
would do
that
is go to
direction.
streaming,
Yeah,
right?
of
Like
course,
the
yeah,
first thing you do is not going to be to buy a record. But
yeah,
you'd think that at least some might, after hearing it, or it might even pique your interest enough that you would just blind buy
yeah,
something
yeah. I
based
mean,
on,
some percentage, right?
right.
Yeah,
Nah. Uh, and I'd always had this view, but that really cemented it, where I was just like, oh, well, nothing means anything. You can
not
get
yeah,
talked about, you can get written about wherever. It doesn't matter. And we've seen the same thing with a lot of our artists with,
yeah.
great pitchfork reviews or whatever. Like, nothing, like, again, maybe your streaming numbers go up. I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I don't care about it.
But even
Um,
then, it's pennies on the dollar. I mean, you would need
yeah.
tens of thousands to equal one record sale.
Right. But I think that there's this idea that, like, if you, I mean, that's the goal for so
Oh
many
yeah,
people,
for
right?
most of our like lives, I'm sure you too. Like
Yep.
you're like, oh man, and there's so many people who spend so much time comparing themselves to people who do get that stuff,
Yep.
and getting really burnt out about not getting that stuff. And I know I've gone through all those periods, and being like,
Yep.
there's the NPR finally, Lars finally picked something up, and then
Yeah.
and it actually like you know, it's even then it like goes, oh, that was a nice month, but like that's so few and far. I can tell you the four in you know in my life, you know, when it mattered at all, and I'm talking about like 30 records. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Sold.
None of
Yeah.
these things are selling out runs of records,
No.
you know, which I think is the view that people have, you know, like,
Yeah.
oh, if we can get best new music, that's it. You know, we should let's double the run now in hopes that we get
Yeah. Oh my
repeated,
God.
you know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just not it. I think that it's I think that the things that have more of an impact are the real niche things that, you know, like, oh, Matt Corvette gave a nice write up on his blog of, you know, this thing. And that's a place where music nerds go and look at stuff. And those music nerds are the people who are already buying records
Yeah.
who might actually roll the bones on a new record.
And also, there's like a 50% chance that if they are that level of committed, they've heard about you three times before that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
absolutely.
there's sort of this overexposure thing that, you know, we went, I worked in like social media analytics for a while, and like, you know, we went from three times somebody has to see you to seven times, and now we're like the thinking is 13 to 21 times they have to hear about
Oh,
it before they're ever even going to
yeah,
register it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And
yeah,
like, uh, I just think that like people don't understand the level of noise, and also like like what is the goal here is not to go, and yeah, nobody else is going to do the job for you, right? Like, and it has so much more to do with the personality. I mean, it really has to be artist driven, is my theory. Though I think you see a larger. Yeah, I have a lot of theories, and I know the people I know, and I think you probably have a better view. So I think this is a good conversation to have. It's like I tend to think and have small anecdotal evidence that the people who do well are not the people for the most part that you think are doing well. You know, half the time, you know, there's weird niche people that just happen to have fan capture, and that's mostly what it is. It's that you are working on nurturing a fan group over time, and you're not leaving them fallow for extended periods of time to forget you,
totally.
and that you are coming from the artist. The artist can be getting a lot of support from the label, but the label will be the in the sort of network effect of exposure to things over time. The label are much smaller hits than the artist being loud and out there
Hmm.
than the label, but it can be supportive, and you're like, oh, there's some legitimacy. We still have this whole complex around legitimacy. Oh,
Yeah,
you have a nice looking record, it's
yeah.
on vinyl, you know, or you have a record label. Um, we still have all those hangups and everything, but I don't think it matters as much as the artists themselves are talking to and capturing slowly fans. But I'm curious to see what you think about that.
Oh, I think you're very right. I think that the you know that the number always changes, but the idea that like you know if you have X number of people in your like core fan base,
Yeah,
that that's what you actually need to survive because no matter what you do, that core group is going to support you, and you know if you can tailor what you're doing and you're like you know authentic voice to those people um and carry them along with you.
that's the big one, right?
Yep. That's what you shoot for, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and I think you're also right with the label thing. I mean, most people, uh, well, first of all, anecdotally to something that you previously mentioned about
Yeah, yeah,
like people being just like overexposed to things
yeah,
in the record shop, so many people come in asking for things that they don't actually know what they're asking for. You know, like
Mhm.
the amount of vagueness with which they are familiar with the thing that they want to buy because they've heard it. They don't recall the artist's name. It was on some playlist. I think it was maybe a chill playlist, and I think the album cover was green, you know, or whatever. And it's just like,
Wow, that's really interesting. Like running a store in the age of streaming and how that becomes the
yeah, or even just asking, you know, if somebody comes in and like
Mhm.
is willing to just like, I mean, a lot of what we do is like recommendation
Yeah,
based, right?
yeah,
And you know, so you ask, of course, like, well, what have you been listening to? And the amount of people that you ask that question to and they can't answer, like they don't know the names of anything that they
yes,
listen to, is pretty astonishing.
yeah.
Um, um, anyways, that's a
But
tangent.
that's so relevant to what we're talking
Yeah,
about on
yeah.
some level too. Yeah, yeah.
But then I also think similarly, you know, music dorks know what a record label is, and we know that
Hmm.
there's like this curatorial element about a record label. We know that there are lots of labels that, yeah, are curating a scene or a sound or whatever, and there's like, I think we all have like our seal of approval
Hmm.
labels where it's just like, well,
Sight unseen. Yeah,
anything that
exactly.
they release, I will
Yeah.
probably love. Um, Most people don't know what a record label is,
Yeah.
and they're not following what a record label is doing,
I can't,
and
like,
nor are
so many
they.
people would be like, so what do you have a studio?
Yeah, right.
Like that's the first thing that people ask me with the record label. I'm like,
Yeah,
I get it, but like it's remarkable how much that's the first question. Like,
yeah. And so, from the store angle, having a lot of interactions with people who, like, um, if they're coming for a recommendation again, and
hmm
I, like ask what they're listening to, and they might list, you know, they list like three Constellation artists or whatever in a row.
hmm
And I'm like, oh, okay, I've got it.
yeah,
Like they're
yeah,
really into Constellation or whatever. And then I like passively mention some new Constellation band or whatever. So, oh, so you probably have been enjoying this record. And they're like, I don't know what that is. And then I'm like, well, like a Constellation, and they don't know what that is, So like, it's like, oh, there's this deep well. That's your recommendation portal. Like, start digging,
yeah. They really like, yeah, and so maybe
Um,
there's some real value there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also part of what we do, even as a distributor. Like we're
hmm
like reminding people, like, hey, here's this label. Every time I solicit something to a store,
hmm
who are being constantly bombarded with stuff. So, like, even if these are the like foremost experts in the indie music world, they're just like talk about bombardment. Like
Oh yeah,
in addition to whatever they are interested in and actively listening to, it's just like listen to this, listen to this, listen to this, buy
yeah.
this. Um, I'm constantly reintroducing all of our labels to them, so it's like,
Oh yeah,
okay, so there's this new release, but before I like pitch you on this new release, I'm going to remind you who this label is and like kind of what they do and what their thing is, and like maybe these things that you have bought in the past that you
yeah.
enjoy. Do you like that? You're probably going to be into this, even if you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of that. It's just like a constant like re-education process that we have to do with everybody, like both customers and stores.
And I think the argument can be made that like, oh, that's marketing. That's always been marketing. But I think it's so much more extreme than it used to be. I think the signal to noise, like you're saying, ratio is just so wild, and I don't think people fully understand. Um, you know, I was just having a conversation about using certain signifiers, and like I'm sort of ramping up to try to relaunch this yield idea of like a kind of imprint, and I'm using very direct language about influences, right?
Hmm.
And the press page has like I'm using recommended if you like for the
Yeah.
first time in a long time, right? And I'm like, well, I'm throwing six records at people, and like they have none of these people are names, like what do you do? How do you they got to get in the door, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so much of my life it's been this purity thing around not doing that, and it's just like, no, I'm going to tell you what the label is. And even if that
Yeah.
kind of puts you an anchor,
Yep.
I'm saying like, oh, I really like this period of electronic music from 98 to '03. And I feel like we've all kind of used that as a stepping stone to where we are now, but then left it all behind, and I'm being very clear about like, that's what the thing is. And I could see a world where like, whoa, people are going to really anchor on that. That's maybe not fair to the artist. I'm like, great. If they anchor on it, then we got them. Then we can move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but like starting from scratch, like how do you not do what you're talking about, which is just,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. I
like
mean, I have a lot of talking about starting from scratch. Like, I have a lot of respect and admiration for anybody who does any of this work. And yeah, starting something fresh,
hmm
whether you've done it before or not, um, uh, whether you're doing it from a label perspective or you're,
yeah,
an artist that's starting to make a go of it on your own, self, like it's practically inadvisable.
yeah, 100%, yeah, yeah. And that was another thing is I think we need to separate when we're having conversations about this. I've started to hear myself say things about like, well, it's different if you're legacy. Like it's different if you had
Yes.
fans before some break point.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know what those. There's probably a series of those break points, like different
Yep.
eras and for different scenes. But like you can't have the same conversation. like even Phil, right? Like you were just talking about those records. Like he has, I'm sure, a built-in fan base that has been built so long, and it's some of the problem I was guessing about that stuff with that you were talking about is he has captured the fan base so well that they know when the record's coming out, they bought the record. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it's not like the sob story of like, oh, we didn't sell any. It is on some level, but
Oh,
it's also
everybody forgot on this one for some reason.
yeah. It's like no, he's beloved, and
Yeah.
not only beloved, but like hyper. You know, there's hyper fixation. I think
Yep.
with that artist, and many legacy artists are like that. The people who have survived again for the what we were talking about, like fan capture and fan nurture, right? And like you have to have different language for that and versus new. I think you have to have different techniques and different language. Like it's like two different, even if we're talking about pretty small indie stuff, it's not even like we're talking music business or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just two industries, you know what I mean? Like I think there's the old industry that like got in before the door closed,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And then I think there's new, and I don't know if that's so, maybe that's so extreme or so like black and white, I guess. But I really do think there's a big difference, you know, between somebody who was established at the right time versus not.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd agree with that for sure.
uh, fantastic.
Settled.
uh, one other question I have for you is, what are you hearing from your labels about like overhead going up and physical, and what creative things are you seeing people do? Because that's been a big topic for me in the last few weeks. Is okay. Two facts I know: the press cycle's over.
Yeah.
Most of everybody's very underemployed. Oh, so there's gonna be three things. Sorry, and physical sales sometimes don't make sense for certain artists in certain ways. And even if you were going to do something physical, does it have to be the hegemony of a piece of vinyl? You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
like, what are you seeing on that sort of side of things?
I mean, yeah, everything is more expensive.
Yep.
Um, um, but um, that said, I do think that there's creative solutions to
Yeah.
that. Mostly, well, in part being what you're saying, like, well, yeah, we're a record label and we love doing vinyl, but like, yeah, maybe not everything we do
Yeah.
is just de facto going to get a vinyl release.
Yep.
Um, Maybe there are things that make sense to have on CD or, God forbid, tape. Um,
I'm so glad you said that. I don't think people understand how hard it is to maintain tape and operationalize tape. It's
yeah,
just,
yeah.
it's nothing
Well, and just
about the
like
format. It's
from a label and like store,
yeah.
like what, okay, so now I'm wholesaling a cassette to another store that they're hoping to make 75 cents on, and you're wondering why none have sold. Like, what store is doing that? Like,
Yeah, it's so different. And then they are going out on tour and going, well, the cassettes are the only things that sell.
oh
And
yeah, absolutely.
you're like, well, yeah, but it's a very different world. And
Correct. Yeah, yeah.
storing and shipping tapes is a nightmare. Like they're never going to show up not destroyed. And,
Yeah.
like it's, as much as I know so many labels who are extreme fans of tapes, it's just like, I know they look at the operational side of that, and probably when they shift to vinyl or CDs, they're like, oh, this is a lot easier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yes.
But yeah, like going to the creative thing, like we help a lot of people. Like we're a lot of our time is spent like assembling records for people,
Mm-hmm.
because that's one of those things, like it might be the cheapest to get the vinyl manufactured here and the jacket manufactured in another place and the insert manufactured in another place and then put it all together your own. Um, it's a lot more work. It's a lot more bandwidth because you have three or four more orders out rather than just this one thing that you're waiting on, this complete package. Um, I think that that's like it's both a potential like cost saving thing, but it is also for a lot of folks like an aesthetic, like an
Oh
intentional
yeah,
thing,
for
like,
sure.
well, this place that I'm getting the vinyl made at, like they don't offer the the paper that I want
Yeah,
or whatever,
yeah.
Um and people are often like surprised that that's an element of like what we do, or that things, all these different components individually arrive and we're responsible
Oh,
for
yeah,
putting them
yeah.
all together, I think that there's enough pressing plants now spread out throughout the states that like it's getting more and more possible to establish relationships with somebody close by so that you can pick stuff up rather than getting
Mhm.
a freight shipment, which is a huge cost. Um, we've got, labels in Chicago that like have great relationships with Smash Plastic, and we work with Cascade all the time,
Yeah.
um, for that reason. Like they're like the local guys, so we can just like go get them.
Yeah.
Um, so those things help. But yeah, I mean, it is more expensive. I think that it's not as crazy as a lot of people think or see like casually, since you're seeing like major labels,
Oh,
releasing
yeah.
things that are like $45 or whatever,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh shit, vinyl must be so expensive. It's like, well, actually, no, like they're making a lot of money on that $45
Oh, yeah,
record.
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially at the scale they're doing it. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
the unit
exactly.
cost is yeah, nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think that it comes down to like being able to rein everything in and accurately, or like maybe even like humbly assess
Mhm.
the situation for a release and say like, well, look, we're we're gonna sell 100 of these, so we're gonna find the place that we can make 100 make sense, um, and that'll be a success.
I
Period.
mean, that would be
Like,
that is my model at minimum, and it's a wild success when it's 100 sell. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. And I think that a lot of new labels, like, I think they don't know that. Like I think
Yeah.
that they jump in and they give whatever plant a call, and the plant's like, well, we have a minimum of 500, but there's a price break at 1,000, and the label's like, okay, 1,000, that seems like a lot, but like maybe, that's like what people do. And I've seen a lot of new labels like get way in over their head on just like, well, now you are storing 700 records. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And there is no chance of you breaking even on this,
No.
like,
You just
um,
paid for direct to dead stock. You know what I mean?
yep.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah. And I think that I think that people just like, often don't acknowledge like the the beauty of small,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and like, and
absolutely.
the realization that like, well, if you do sell out of however many, you make 200 copies of something and you sell out, and there's, people knocking on your door to
Yeah,
like, please, please, please make more, you can decide to make more eventually,
yeah.
like there's no harm in
And
that.
that's gotten a lot easier than it used to be too. A lot of represses they've purposely made that a little easier in a lot of places I've seen. But
Hmm.
yeah, 100%. And we've been talking about like I would like coined this little phrase of like gardening, not gambling. Like I feel like so many labels go like, well, did this one work? Oh, it fell off. And I was in that cycle too. I'm still, it's not like I've changed anything. I'm just hoping to change things, right? And it's like that sort of feeling of like, I shoot this little one out and for, whatever the press cycle is, I, hope, 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 hope. Okay, that one didn't work and it's over. And instead thinking, yeah, I was talking a lot about like, well, how does a manager, an artist think about the career of a artist versus a label, and I feel like they're very different, right? It's like
Oh
one
yeah.
is about growth and one is about hitting, a moment, right?
Yeah.
Labels think in moments, and so this idea of like flipping that on its head and saying, well, earn the piece of vinyl, earn the CD, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like show like there's sort of this hubris of like if somebody likes your stuff enough, that's enough. Like if a label likes your stuff enough to be like, I want to support you, that
Yep.
equals jumping you up to the certain level. And it's just is that real or not? And as much as that ideal would be great and that like labels have like this massive like ability to move opinion on something, I think that we need to be much more stepped in our process and honest about who you're talking to. You go, yes, this record is great, it's super great, in fact, but we need to work it and not just like have a weekend where we're like talking about it a lot and then we stop talking about it,
Yep.
like
Yeah, and then on to the next thing and on to the
yeah,
next thing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we get that a lot with, artists who, um, are like so desperate, asking us like, we really need a label for this, like who do you know that we can like send this record to, or whatever. I'm just like, I don't know that there are many labels that are doing that anymore, that are like uncalled for demo thing I've never heard before. Yes, we want to make copies of this, nor do I think that, again, like you said, like even if this is a great record, uh, what
Yeah.
what that label is going to mean for like, well, now you're going to sell 3 times as much,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I that again, like
And you're gonna have so much more skin in the game if you a lot of these smaller artists are gonna have so much more skin in the game and go figure out what it will take to sell it instead of
yeah,
going like, oh, the label has it,
yeah,
You're not training yourself into good patterns, I don't think.
yeah,
Which is again kind of acting against my own interest on some level, but it's just true, like I've kind of been doing this forever and will continue to do it, and it's this, pile of debt and whatever. But like I'm also kind of trying to go like, look, I'm at this point where I have honestly a phenomenally great catalog. I think at this, like if I could tell myself 15 years ago, hey, this is what your record label is going to sound like and how good
yeah,
each release is, I'd be like, wow. And I have all this, built up processes, and partnerships and all these things, and it's like, oh, and it's all gone, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like if
yeah,
I could tell myself reading Volcanic Tongue and Andy Aquarius, and going like, we're gonna do it, we're gonna work with some of these people and do all this stuff, I'd be so stoked. But it's like, well, it happened after the door closed, and
yeah, yeah,
but I think the right thing to do is go, well, what the hell do we do now? You know what I mean? And stop being so precious about it,
for sure.
and so it's good to hear that. I mean, it's actually really good to hear all these opinions that we're having is great, but being reminded that you are doing that yourself, that you are forced to kind of go like, well, what can we do? Like what value can we provide?
Yeah,
And I think that's the mindset that everybody needs to get into about this stuff for like 100%,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm working hard to kind of have that dialogue out in the open. And I guess the biggest thing that we both can say to anybody listening to this is like, shit's hard for everybody and nobody's selling the way you think they're selling. And the few people who are doing it because they've been working really, really hard on managing that fan base for a very long time. That's about
it's very true, and that I don't think has changed in years and years and years and years.
mm,
There have always been this little tiny echelon of people
yes.
in both the mainstream and the indie world who are just like boom, 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 boom. And in that tiny bit, there's an even tinier bit of a new artist that pops up and is like bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
And all the rest of us are like
Yeah.
looking at a box of records going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
And it's so funny, like it's such a funny thing where you're like, oh, this record's so good, I just have to do it. And you just know that you're gonna be 3 months, 6 months down the line and just be like, wow, what madness hit me that I thought that was gonna work, just like coming from 0 to 60 on some
Yeah.
record. It's like I think it is a little madness. I think you are just like, I really love this stuff, like I'm willing to take the hit. But
And I do think a thing that has changed actually is that I think in a I hesitate to say consumer, music listeners perspective, I think that there's less of a willingness to um, throw down and take a chance on something that you've
oh
not
yeah.
heard before now than ever.
Mhm.
That's certainly something that I see from a
Oh
store
yeah, of course, yeah.
perspective. And so, the days of, well, if I could just get my record on the shelves at
Mm.
X, Y, and Z store, that's also not enough because
Yeah,
if
that's
a
a great
person
point.
who's browsing doesn't recognize your thing, even if your cover art slaps ass, they're probably not going home with it.
Yeah.
Like they might look you up on Spotify. That's about it. Um, uh, you know, again, then the smaller view is like, well, it does happen sometimes. Like in my store, for example, that's the thing that we pride ourselves on. I think a lot of people come in and leave with a thing that they've never heard before and would not have just found on their
Yeah.
own. Um, but that's I just sold one copy, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. That doesn't. That's a lot of effort and a lot of that's
Yeah, and among hundreds I have on the shelf, I did
yeah,
that for one today, you know,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. The effort to the salesmanship level, like that's quite a concierge level thing for one sale,
yeah.
uh, but yeah, yeah, the really well run. Um, all these things come back to fundamentals on some level too. It doesn't mean that they're gonna do well, but it's like, is your store really well run? Is it really welcoming? Do you have a really good staff? Like, same with all the things I've spent years being good and bad at, of like customer service and like being very visible and having a clear take on who you are and what your brand is. Like, all these are fundamentals to running any small business.
Mhm.
And I think you have to have at least that great to have the ability and the bandwidth to catch the ball if you do get lucky, right? Is basically it,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
So
And that's, like, again, I think that all of this is also dancing around this central thing of like the chaos and unpredictability of what we do. And so like we work with about 100 labels and
Mhm.
artists, and I cannot schedule our lives in the least because I don't know, like tomorrow could be the busiest day for all of our labels and artists simultaneously, and we're sweating it. Or tomorrow could be a day where I open up my inbox and think that Gmail has gone down over the, where I'm like, what? Wait, how all 100 labels, not one thing to
Not
pack? Like,
one
what's
email.
going on?
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, you don't know, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
again, unless you have that, like, okay, it's that artist, so, and it's time for that artist to present their thing to the world, and you're gonna see all those familiar names in the inbox in the pre-order list.
yeah.
Great, and I think that that's, I don't know, that's the beautiful thing is like, oh, great, here's that core group of people, they're supporting it, so that other people who are those outliers do have the ability to take a chance on it.
Yes.
Um, Great. And I think that's all we can ask for.
I think this is my last thing. Thank you for your time, by the way. Uh, the I struggle with saying this out, so I wonder what you think about it. But I struggle saying it without it saying either scolding or what's the right tone? Being a little, I don't know what, but the thing that will save us, the thing that saves labels, the thing that goes from is when 40 people are very good consumers. You know what I mean? Like like when you are that person that has picked a label and said, "Oh, I just want to buy everything from that," or picked an artist who's very prolific and said, "I'm just going to buy everything they do." Like, I don't think we have a very good feedback mechanism to show that person their outsized impact. And if everybody, literally, this is such a dumb stupid statement, but it's like, if everybody kind of grabbed their 10 and mostly stuck to their 10 and kind of stuck to their guns on that, it's like a political movement. You know what I mean? Like it
For
would
sure.
change the industry, right?
Yeah.
I have, X amount of thousands of people on the mailing list and various other things, right? Like, I need 80 people to buy a record. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I don't want the same people even every time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's so funny, it's so hard to not come off as scolding, but it's like, if you are looking at a record and you're stoked about it and you're sitting on Bandcamp, and it's like the difference between that $8 for digital or $18 for the vinyl, of you choosing more often than not to do that than rather go stream, at least of a certain level of artists,
Hmm.
that's not scolding, it's commending. You know what I mean? Every time you make that choice, every time you walk into the record store and go, what came out this week, it's a really big deal. It's like, it shouldn't be a complex thing to say, but it's like the industry doesn't work without consumers, and it's like we also need hyper like specific consumers. Like, these consumers are bearing a weight. You know what I mean? In on some level,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to exactly say it, but I think there's a way of saying that doesn't come off as negative.
Yeah, totally. I'm gonna talk and walk because my computer's about to die. But uh, yeah, I totally agree. And I think that it's not. I don't think it's scolding. I think that uh, I think that a lot of people, like again, you and I operate in this world, and so it all seems very common sense to us.
Yeah,
But I think like we know that streaming doesn't pay. We know
yeah.
that. But I think that genuinely a lot of people don't.
Oh, of
Like it's
course, yeah.
even to the point where like if you and I see somebody post about it, it's like, yeah, duh. Like I
Hmm.
don't need to see the stats. I don't need to whatever. But I do think that a lot of people don't realize that.
Hmm.
That's one of the conversations I have the most in the store when people, are like maybe even like oddly confrontational about like, well, why records? Like, well, why this? And I have to describe, like, well, if there's somebody that you really like an artist, like this
Hmm.
is a really good way to actively give them money so they can keep doing the thing. And like I also don't love getting into the like vote with your dollar, like
Yeah, that's kind of where I get worried about some of this language, right?
exactly. But I do think that what you're saying is true in that like yeah, if we all like drilled down and had like yeah, our handful of things that we, our ride or dies that our life would be measurably poorer if they went away.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about
So no matter what, even if it's a flyer thing, I'm gonna say that you get my $20 every release that you do. Um, and that record is going to be on my shelf. I might not listen to it,
it. Okay.
as much as some of the ones that I really deeply love, but I will know that I'm going to get one that I deeply love
Yeah.
because of that
Yes.
previous $20 investment. I think it is really important, and I think that a lot of people don't think about it that much. I think that a lot of people don't realize the impact that just how small things are. That the impact of
Yeah.
five sales might have for a label.
It can
Like
change, yeah, your month
yep,
completely. Yeah.
yeah,
100%. I think that's a perfect place to end this. Thank you so much, Nick. It's great to connect a little bit more on this stuff. And if you have any other thoughts, I'm very much in this searching thing. If anything comes to mind, go ahead and send me some thoughts because I
okay,
think we need we need the people who are exposed to this the most talking a lot about like what do we do now? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and I think you're thinking out of the box more than most people. You know, so
I agree, and I will do so. And yeah, I think that is important. I am lucky in that I get to have these conversations with
hmm.
people who don't think about this stuff
Hmm.
regularly. I also talk about it a lot with people who do think about it regularly and whose livelihood depends on it. But I think it is important to like yeah talk about how to support the things that enrich your life and really give that like careful consideration
Yeah, I think now more
as
than
things
ever,
go ahead. Yeah,
especially
totally.
as we all need a new romanticism movement. You know, we need
Yeah.
something to counter the forces that are happening right now. That was great. Thanks to Nick. I hope this one. I hope people go and listen to the full version of this one because I think it's such a good conversation. And Nick's, not so much for me, but Nick really, uh, I don't know, has some good, deep, informed, well-informed thoughts about what's going on in small to mid-size indie labels and artists. Thanks everybody who reached out after last week's uh, video, and I will say anybody who's kind of curious about the yield thing right now, while we're still in this fomentation phase, I made that site I was showing last week even better. And if you are curious about hearing any of this stuff, I'll probably happily let you pop in and listen. And now it's streaming on that page, so you can just stream different records. Yeah. So if you're interested in the yield stuff, uh, hit me up. I think I think I'll play more Yield. It's, it's kind of the theme of right now. So I'll play something from, let's hear something from Steve Eldon Kerr, a real big impetus for planning and uh, just executing this label, this imprint, was from early conversations around a release he sent me, and I'm really proud of the work we've been doing together around this, and it's taken years to come out. So let's listen to a track from Steve Eldon Kerr. And as always, be kind, be safe, and I'll see you next week.